Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarottam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjalimanatosmi लये संबोधयेत् चित्तं विक्षिप्तं शमयेत् पुनः सकाशायं विजानीयात् समप्राप्तं न चालयेत्. Om. So far we have studied the most fundamental concepts. As I mentioned, if we really understand these fundamental concepts, then the study of Yoga Darshana and actually the putting it into practice will become much easy. And those terms are the terms yoga. So we saw the alternative meanings, that is it yoking or is it samadhi, and determined that it is samadhi. Then chitta, we determined that chitta is the reflection of Paramatma's mind, chit, associated with the three gunas, which is customized for that particular sentient being. That particular individual, it can be even actually devata, manushya, or of course even animals, sentient animals, but of course our subject matter is human beings. Then obviously because of the chitta, the combination of sentiency and the trigunas, vrittis or modifications arise. And then the concept is that to go back to the original state of chiti by means of nirodha or control of the modifications of the chitta. So that was the basis of Yoga Shastra. Then, of course, we also studied in depth the various avastha or the states of the mind, where it can be kshipta, mudha, vikshipta, ekagra, and niruddha. And we also illustrated that with a few stories to elucidate how those various states can arise. So, this definition of chitta we have to remember. And then it can also be mapped onto an experience, an everyday experience. Consider that it is a absolutely beautiful, clear sky, and it's a moonlit night. A Paurnima, a Kartika Shuddha Paurnima, for example, when it is so beautiful outside. And then you are standing on the bank of a lake. So you look down upon this lake. The reflection of the moon is shining through. And because it's the autumn, a light breeze is also there. And so it is creating waves on the lake. And the moon, which is reflecting on this lake, assumes different shapes depending on the shape of the wave. So we are observing this moon, and when we are looking at this moon, it looks like as though each image of the moon is distorted, and it is moving and constantly moving. And all we have to do is look up into the sky. As soon as you look up into the sky, you discover that it is only one moon. So this physical act of taking your eyes away from the lake where you see multiple moons and seeing the one moon, the very act of moving is actually nirodha. That is all. It is just looking elsewhere in the proper way. So just as one moon assumes so many shapes, so does, that is the one moon which has got only one shape is the chitta, whereas when it looks as a reflection in the lake, it is the chitta. So this chitta has got the ability either to establish itself in the one moon, then we call it as yogaha chitta vritti nirodha tada drashtuswarupe avasthanam, then it is actually established in the swarupa or the abode of the self. So it's merely looking up, that is all. Or another alternative for this chitta is also to assume the modifications, all the modifications, that is the every kind of and shape of and the intensity of reflection of the moon in each one of the waves can also be reflected upon our mind, and then every time you look at it, it takes that shape. So vritti saryopyam itaratra. So as simple as that. If we are looking at multiplicity, the chitta is in vritti. If we are looking at the one, the chitta is in swarupa. That simple. There is no words really to praise this extraordinary wisdom that Yoga Shastra gives us in such a simple way. So why is this so profound a knowledge? Why do we think that this is very profound knowledge? It is because our mind has never seen tranquility. So we have never looked up from the lake into the sky to discover there is only one moon, which is so near. So Yoga Shastra is teaching us how to shift our gaze from the many moons that are there on the lake to the one moon that is in the sky. And note that we are able to appreciate the myriad moons in the lake and the one moon in the sky only if we are standing on the bank of the lake. If we are actually in the lake, we will not be able to appreciate any of these, because we will only be trying to stay afloat. So standing on the bank, and then the standing of the bank is the seer or the onlooker. So when the chitta becomes the seer, and that chitta can see at once the multiple moons and the one moon. So the samanya jnana of the chitta vritti can be converted into the vishesha jnana or the vijnana. So the samanya jnana is the apparent multiple moons. Really there is not many moons, apparent multiple moons. But the true vishesha jnana or vijnana is the jnana of the one moon. So therefore, the vritti, the avastha of the vritti depends on whether I am standing on the bank or not. And if I don't, in the sutra number 5, the sage goes on to say, vrittayaha panchatayaha klishta klishtaha. So in the last iteration of our study, we just said that, the vrittis are 5 kinds, and they can be classified into the one that generates sorrow or difficulty or hardship or affliction, and the other which does not. And then we just moved on. But now let's go a little deeper into the analysis of this sutra. So the sutra talks about vrittayaha panchatayaha, that is, there are 5 kinds of vrittis. Please note that this sutra is different from the identification of the avastha or the states of the vrittis. Earlier we looked at the states of the vritti, each vritti as Each vritti could be one of these different states, which is kshipta, muda, etc. So, but that's only a state of a vritti. Here, vrittis themselves can be classified into 5 kinds. So, they are klishta. Klishta means those who are harmful, those who are afflicted. So, what is the origin of this word klishta? It comes from the Sanskrit word klesha. Klesha is caused by a klishta vritti. So, what is klesha? Later on in the second chapter, we are going to see kleshas are ignorance, avidya. It is the sense of individuality, I-making, asmita, then attachment, raga, aversion, dvesha, and clinging, abhinivesha. So those 5 are defined as kleshas. So when any of the chitta vritti is associated with any of these 5, then it becomes klishta. So klesha is experienceable by the chitta, but the cause of the klesha is the klishta characteristic of the particular klesha. That is the theorem. So now we see that by prefixing the letter a klishta, then it is opposite. So in that case, either klishta is a particular vritti is a klishta, or a particular vritti is a klishta. So now a very, very important question arises in the mind of the listener. So far what I have seen, we have learned that chitta vritti nirodha, that is controlling the various fluctuations of the mind, we can attain samadhi, which is yoga. So therefore, what is the process? There is chitta. This chitta has got vritti, all the modifications, and these modifications are identified. Then I apply the yoga methodology. Then I control the modifications of the mind. Then I attain absorption, samadhi. Then the next step is liberation. So it is conceptually understood. Now let us see, to control the vrittis, should we not have an idea of what vrittis are? If we don't know our enemy, how can we fight the enemy? So now the question is, we have to know the vrittis. So immediately the thinking person will say, how many vrittis are there? Aren't those vrittis really infinite? In each individual person, there are infinite vrittis happen. Every moment our mind will be going through one or the other avastha. Each one of our modification of the mind, fluctuation of the mind can be kshipta, muda, etc. Each one of them. And what a parade of vrittis are there in the mind, in one person's mind. So even I cannot begin to count how many vrittis that I go through in every moment, every day, and in my lifetime. And Yoga Shastra has to address the vrittis of the whole humanity, starting from the beginning of time to the end of time. Infinite vrittis in individual mind, infinite jivas, infinite vrittis in the infinite jivas. There is no way that the vrittis can ever be counted and ever be known, and we can create a database or a spreadsheet saying, for this particular nuance of the vritti, this is how we do Nirodha. So almost at this point, if the teacher, Patanjali Maharshi, cannot handle this problem, the whole teaching fails at this point. We can never proceed. So that is why you see how critical is this sutra. Because he himself puts a question that if the vrittis are so many, then how can I control them? And then so extremely, with great intelligence and insight, Patanjali saves and solves this problem by using this word panchatayyaha. Tayyaha. That's what he just added. Now, panchatayyaha, tai means limb, 5-limbed. So he said, no matter what vritti that you are talking about, every vritti is 5-limbed. So this 5-limbed vritti, only 5 limbs are possible for every vritti. And for every vritti among these 5 limbs, there can be only 2 kinds. It can be either klishta or it can be aklishta. So now you see how easy it is to handle, no matter whatever is the state of my mind. And that mind has got these 5 limbs. And these 5 limbs, each one of the limb actually for that matter, can be either klishta or aklishta. Now it becomes, we can develop a lifestyle of transferring klishta vrittis into aklishta vrittis. So what does klishta mean? It comes from the Sanskrit root klish. Klish means to torment, to cause distress. Or in other words, klish, which is the tormenting root, when it becomes a klesha, it is a dukkha generating entity. And this dukkha generating entity, as I mentioned, will be studied in the 2nd chapter. But any vritti, no matter what vritti, subject of that vritti, as long as it has caused dukkha, either now or a possibility of creating the dukkha at a later time, any time, then it is a klishta vritti. So, whatever does not create klishta vritti, either now or at a later time, is aklishta vritti. Now we have got to look at this in a little more in the light of the doctrine of karma and also in the light of the doctrine of gunas. Again, you see, the genius of the ancient Indian thinking is the discovery of gunas. Everything centers around these 3 gunas. So having discovered these 3 gunas, in terms of guna, what is the chief contribution of rajas and tamas, the pradhana karma or outcome or activity of rajas and tamas? The purpose of rajas and tamas being there in us is for the sake of pursuit of purusharthas, isn't it? Why do we have rajas? We have rajas so that we can pursue artha, kama, dharma. And then why do we have tamas? We have to rejuvenate and refresh ourselves, and also we have to actually protect ourselves, become defensive against any attack on our pursuit of purushartha. So rajas tamo gunas are there. The pradhana reason for rajas tamo gunas is to pursue purushartha. And we also determined that purushartha, pursuit of dharmartha, kama, always comes with the pain, mixed with pain, dukkha mishritatvam. So therefore, what are klishta vrittis? Pursuit of rajastamo guna, pursuit of purushartha with the help of rajastamo gunas we employ, and it causes klishta vritti. So what happens? We go on accumulating karma. And every time we accumulate karma, it breeds more karma. And therefore, what is klishta vritti? Klishta vritti is the breeding ground for karma. Now, please note that we are not advocating whether you should pursue purushartha or not. That's not the issue here. The issue is pursuit of purushartha is because of rajas and tamas. And rajas and tamas, the chief reason is to create karma. And therefore it is also going to give you a klishta vritti. Because if we did not have ignorance that we are already liberated, because everywhere in the Vedanta they say that you are nitya shuddha buddha muktaha. You are eternal, because your Atma is eternal, Nitya. You are ever pure, there is no impurity in you. You are already you know who you are that Atman, and you are liberated. And that we immediately say, no, how can I be? How can I be liberated? I am a limited person. How can I be eternal? I see myself going through these 6 vikaras, the Shad vikaras. So we refuse, and then we say that for the sake of my security, I have to go back and pursue dharmartha kama, and therefore we keep being bound by the klishta vritti, karma and guna. So this guna and karma, both of them are like a con artist. They actually come and convince us that if you don't pursue rajastama gunas, and if you don't continuously be active, then somehow your life is a failure. We are thoroughly convinced about it. And therefore, klishta vrittis, what they do is they employ the pramana that we are going to see in the next sutra, that it will give us tools for encouraging the rajastamo gunas also. So these klishta vrittis, what they do is, they home in on a vastu. A vastu is an entity, is a particular act, it's a particular activity, it's a particular tool for getting our dharmartha kama, and then it will create the dualities. It will create the dualities of raga, dvesha, dualities of dharma and adharma, and ultimately end up as klesha only. So Yoga Shastra has to develop a strategy. And this strategy, interestingly, is to overcome the ignorance and the dominance of rajastamo gunas, but at the same time does not take away action and activity. We should continue to be active, but the karma generated by action and activity should be now removed. So that will become the next project. So therefore, here the Shastra will now talk about the interplay of klishta vritti and aklishta vritti. So by means of applying the counter of aklishta vritti, the klishta vritti has got to be overcome. Now you please think again. Let's go back to the definition. This vritti is of 5 kinds. Each vritti within itself can be both klishta and aklishta. So to counter the klishta of the vritti, you don't have to go out of the vritti. Within the vritti, the strategy is available. That is, by means of aklishta vritti, klishta vritti has got to be countered. And later on, Patanjali is going to say, through vairagya, even the aklishta vritti can also be overcome. So one klishta vritti is removed by aklishta vritti. Aklishta vritti is resolved by vairagya. If all these three things happen, karma continues to happen, activity continues to happen without generating the karma phala. This also we studied in the Bhagavad Gita, asanga shastrena dridhena chitva. We saw in chapter 15 of the Bhagavad Gita, asanga shastrena dridhena chitva. So the basis for Krishna's teaching is in this classification. So let us take one example to understand this whole strategy. In fact, this morning, Naina and Nagendra were here in our house. We were just talking about a situation in Abhijnana Shakuntala. So in the Abhijnana Shakuntala Nataka, we have Kanva Maharshi. Now Kanva Maharshi, what is his lifestyle that he had chosen? Kanva Maharshi has chosen a lifestyle of not getting married. He dedicates himself for study, contemplation and teaching. And therefore he goes far away from the capital of Ayodhya. And then he establishes an ashrama there and dedicates his life for teaching and bringing up all his students. Nothing he did to choose any klishta vritti, isn't it? In fact, he deliberately chose a profession which will not cause him any hardship, any dukkha. He chose that because he never got entangled into any family issue. But from where did suddenly Shakuntala appear? Somewhere something happens, some association happens, and a child lands up in his lap. And because of his compassion, he brings up that child, makes her into a beautiful person. And then he did not invite Dushyanta to come to the ashrama. Again, it just happened. And you know the story. And then what happens? He has to send Shakuntala to Dushyanta's home. Now you see, there is nothing he did to generate dukkha. The attachment of Kanva Maharshi to Shakuntala was intense, no doubt. He brought her up like his own daughter. But he never realized how intense would be the feeling if she were to leave to her husband's house. And suddenly, all aklishta vrittis only, isn't it? He's receiving the child, he's bringing up the child, loving the child, educating the child. Every one of those vrittis were aklishta vrittis only. But now suddenly, when he has to send her to her husband's house, the vritti became klishta vritti. Then he says, oh my God, why am I sad? So now he gives, Kalidasa gives an extraordinary picture of what happens when a klishta vritti affects the human mind. So any time when you have felt a dukkha, please check if these things happen to you. Now Shakuntala is going to her husband's house. Yasyatyadya Shakuntaleti Hridayam Samsprishtam. My heart shrinks, afflicted. Utkantaya. My throat chokes up. She is going to her husband's house. She has to go to her husband's house. If she doesn't go to her husband's house, you will be more sad. All those things have to happen. But my throat is choking up. So anytime our throat is choking up with any dukkha or any perceived dukkha is an aklishta vritti. Samsprushtam utkanthaya kanthastambita bashpa hridya kalushaha. Then not only what has happened, my eyes have become misty because there are tears in my eyes and they are creating a misty, and I am not able to see very clearly. Kanthastambita bashpa hridya kalusham. The sorrow of my heart has transferred itself into the tears in my eye, blurring my sight. And then this blurring of the sight has also made my mind not working. Chinta jadam darshanam. If this can happen, Vaiklabyam mamatavad idrishamaho snehad aranyaukasaha. If this can happen to me, who is living in the forest, away from the challenges of a economic life, because there is no economic life for Kanva Maharshi. He need no purushartha, no kama artha for him. Only dharma moksha is his focus. If this should happen, pidyante grihina kathannu tanaya vishlesha dukkhair navaihi. What happens to those family people who have to see their daughters leave for the husband's house? So this episode tells us how to identify a klishta vritti. So a klishta vritti is where either now or at a later time there is a potential for us to feel a tug in our heart. And this klishta vritti, how does he counter the aklishta vritti? Kanva Maharshi now counters the aklishta vritti. They were all sitting around the Yajna Kunda, and of course constantly the Yajna will be going on in a Gurukula. Then huge flames are coming, and from the flames are coming the smoke. And now he applies the aklishta vritti and says, may this smoke, sanctified by the Vedic mantras that we have chanted, may this smoke follow you, O Shakuntala, lead you safely to your husband's house. Ami Vedim Paritah Kripta Dishnya, etc. He uses a beautiful Rigveda mantra, and then as soon as he says and blesses Shakuntala, and he tells Priyamvada and Anasuya, you go, please accompany her and take her to her husband's house. As soon as that happened, he applied the aklishta vritti. So what is the aklishta vritti that Kanva Maharshi applied? He stood on the banks or sitting in front of Yajnakunda, and he says, what was my role? My role was to nourish my child. My role was to educate my child. My role was to give the proper values to my child. And now my child has become an adult. And now it has become an adult, and this adult has to carry on his life, and now I am going to bless my child and say, may in your life God be with you all the time. I want you to contextualize this into our own lives. There are so many things, the abhinivesha or the clinging that takes place. We cling to many things. We cling to people. We cling to our children. We cling to our family. We cling to our friends. We cling to our job. Why is it people are so nervous about their jobs? It is because they think that if I lose my job, oh my God, this is the end of my life. It is not, isn't it? We can always find something to do. So this abhinivesha is one of the greatest klishta vrittis. If you look at the Kanva episode, you see that as he had discharged all his duties towards Shakuntala, and once the responsibility is over, now he says, yes, you are going to your husband's house. Aklishta vritti is from now onwards, you are under the protection of your husband. We educate our children, and once they are educating our children and they get into a job, they know that they can make their living. What is our role? Our role is let these beautiful flames and the mantras and the smoke coming out of the Yajnashala accompany you and protect you throughout your life. And Kanva Maharshi turns back, and then he will start paying attention to bring up the next child in the ashrama. Is it possible to transfer these skills into our lives? Absolutely possible. Should. So I am giving this example to say how a klishta vritti can counter a klishta vritti. See how peaceful we become at this point. Kanva Maharshi doesn't appear after this in the whole of the Abhijnana Shakuntala over. Once the fourth Anka is over in the Abhijnana Shakuntala Nataka, we don't see him anymore. Similarly, you see Vishwamitra, we don't see him anymore after Balakanda. Because each one of them have a role to play. We have a role to play in the life of our children. And once that role play is done, then what happens? Then the klishta vritti has got to be countered by aklishta vritti, which is the blessing that may you be happy and comfortable wherever you are. Now we have to go to the next level. The next level is Vairagya. Because aklishta vritti for Kanva Maharshi happened, saying that I am now blessing you. Here is Shakuntala, Priyamvada and Anasuya are going to accompany you. So they will make sure that you are delivered to Dushyanta. But then he could be constantly worrying about them too. And now he comes back and then resumes his duty as Kulapati. That's the dhvani or the suggestion in the in the Abhijnana Shakuntala, Kalidasa provides us by saying, not bringing Kanva again. See, when Dushyanta rejects, Shakuntala could have come back to Kanvashrama, right? But she doesn't come back to Kanvashrama, she goes to Maricashrama. This is the flow of life. So this episode is an excellent example of how to counter Klishta Vritti by Aklishta Vritti. Now back to the theory. So Rajas and Tamas, when Rajas and Tamas, which is a characteristic of Klishta Vritti, is countered by the Aklishta Vritti, then Sattva is left. Isn't it? Rajas and Tamas is balanced and is minimalized. So Sattva Vritti comes up. When the Sattva Vritti comes up, then for the essence of the Buddhi, for the intellect, then Yoga Shastra says it will get a Prajna Prasada. Prajna Prasada means clarity of sight, clarity of insight. A perfect clarity of insight is obtained. This is technically called as Prajna Prasada Khyati. Khyati means knowledge. Prasada means grace. Prajna means wisdom. The knowledge of the or the identification of grace of Sattva Guna is experienced by the Buddhi. So in other words, suppose I say that I am very peaceful in my mind. I have become very peaceful in my mind because I have countered Klishta Vritti by Aklishta Vritti. That is, I just blessed my daughter and said that the mantras and the smoke from this Homakunda follow you to safety. And this Aklishta Vritti also was overcome by Vairagya because I turned towards my next duty of running the university. So the fact that he could turn his mind back to what he has to do to run the university is Prajna Prasada Khyati. See, this is how Klishta Vritti, when we understand, then in our life we will never lose purpose. Because all the time, how do we define purpose of our life? When we are in Brahmacharya Ashrama, we say the purpose of life is to get education. Then you go into Grihastha Ashrama, you say the purpose of life is to get good children. Then you get the good children, then the purpose of life becomes bringing them into good citizens. Once they have become good citizens, then what is the purpose of life? That's where loneliness, that's where clinging, all of these things will enter into our lives. Couple that with old age, couple that with sickness. Isn't this the misery of life? How to overcome this? From the beginning, Klishta Vrittis have to be identified and it should be countered by Aklishta Vritti, and simultaneously Vairagya ability also have to be cultivated is what Patanjali Maharshi is trying to lead us into by suddenly introducing the 5th sutra. In 4 sutras, the Yoga Shastra, Yoga Darshana is over, as I mentioned yesterday. But now he has got to help us to go into Samadhi state. And therefore the subject matter of the buddhi has got to be changed. So the subject matter so far has been dharmartha kama. And now the subject matter has to be changed to bring it into sattva guna, the identification of purusha, the application of discrimination viveka. These three have got to be introduced into our lives. So that introduction, when it happens, the Yoga Shastra talks about klishta vritti, when countered by aklishta vritti, lays the ground for viveka khyatihi. Khyati means knowledge. Viveka means discrimination. Knowledge of discrimination and discriminative knowledge. Both of them are introduced. So this is where again we have to contemplate on what is the role of gunas. The role of gunas is to make us do things. That's all. So that means to cause effect. That's the role of gunas. Guna makes us do karya or act, and which will invariably end up in effect. So therefore, as soon as effect is seen, it is in the effect state that we will see whether a vritti is klishta or aklishta. And by that time it becomes too late, and therefore now aklishta vritti, what it does is it will make us pause before taking up any project. We'll never jump into any project without due deliberation. So the next important concept that it actually introduces is the ability not to jump and do something impulsively. Quick action, quick decisions will be necessary. But the thing is, quick decisions also will be preceded by quick perception of klishta, aklishta vrittis. It's only a question of speed with which we absorb all of this. So this brings up a very important question again. We have never seen anybody who is free from raga and dvesha. Never seen. Therefore, everybody's vritti is klishta only. So, sir, in this klishta vritti pravaha, isn't it? It's a continuous current. In the individual mind, in the universal mind, in the group mind, in everybody, klishta vritti is all the time is going. All right, I accept that there are aklishta vrittis. I do accept that. But then this aklishta vrittis in the crowded space of klishta vritti cannot function. An objection raises. Isn't it so? When we are attacked constantly by klishta vritti, how can we bring up this counterpoint of aklishta vritti? Because all experiences are so rapid fire in our life, isn't it? I mean, if we just look back into our own lives, it looks like just yesterday that I was 10 years old. It looks just yesterday that I got married. How quickly things have passed. And how many times I have constantly got the klishta vritti. A child becomes sick, klishta vritti. Child goes to school, klishta vritti. Child comes back from school, klishta vritti. Is there in this pravaha, is it possible at all? So, sir, Mr. Patanjali, you were telling me that it is possible to counter that is just a figment of your imagination. So now the teacher responds and asks you the question. Were there not moments of calm, peace and tranquility between each Klishtavrati? What were you doing in those break time? Did you think about anything about the Aklishtavrati during that break time at all? See how he brings us to our center. In that brief break time, then he is saying Agama Acharyopadesha Ishvara Pranidhana. If that happens in between Klishtavrtis, when they are happening, then later on in Sutra number 12, Abhyasa Vairagya will make sense. So this is where our culture introduced a concept of Nama Parayana or Nama Japa. The most powerful way of finding the gap between Klishtavriti and Aklishtavriti is Nama Japa. You remember I had many times mentioned Om Namah Shivaya, a simple chanting in between the various vrittis that are going about. This is what I was doing when Usha was able to climb the staircase. I would say, every stair you climb, say Om Namah Shivaya. And she would do it. Say Om Namah Shivaya and then climb a step. Om Namah Shivaya, climb a step. Each step that she climbed the staircase was an agony for her because of her immense weakness in the lower part of the body. Klishtavrati. So how did it become a klishta? You say Om Namah Shivaya between two klishta. First step, when you put a step, klishta. Before you take the next step, which is going to be klishta, Om Namah Shivaya. That is how we have got to deal. And who gave this mantra to us? Is it not the Veda? Is it? Namah Shivaya is in the very center of Rudradhyaya, the Panchakshara. So Veda has given, our teachers have given. So by employing this in between the chidra of Klishtavriti, Nama Parayana is the strategy to deal with a Klishtavriti dynamic. So now the next question arises with such a huge conglomeration of Klishtavriti. This one japa of Namaparayana that I am making, will it not be outshouted? Question arises. That question Patanjali has to answer. Now imagine a dark, cloudy, rainy Amavasya night. Darkness, darkness, darkness everywhere. Then you get a flash of lightning. Can all the darkness around the lightning take away the brilliance of the lightning? Impossible, isn't it? That is why the aklishta vritti, aklishta samskara, klishta vritti, klishta samskara, all of those things, before they can rise up once again, what the scripture has taught, what the teacher has taught, Acharya Upadesha, the Veda Upadesha, if those things are incorporated, then what happens? Slowly, the influence of aklishta vritti goes on increasing. The impact of klishta vritti goes on reducing. And then a perfect ground in the chitta is made for the ability for abhyasa and vairagya. Here, Patanjali Maharishi is preparing us for abhyasa vairagya. And therefore now, whether the vritti, chitta vritti is klishta or aklishta, both of them have got the five kinds. The five kinds are pramana, viparyaya, vikalpa, nidra, smritayaha is the next sutra. That means the pramana, which is the various proofs, and viparyaya, vikalpa, nidra, smriti, all these five support klishta vritti and aklishta vritti. And therefore, to identify the influence of these five on klishta or aklishta vritti, we have to understand what are these, and those definitions of pramana, viparyaya, vikalpa, nidra, smriti, and how they affect the klishta vritti and aklishta vritti. And so that will be our subject matter in our next class. Thank you.